Terry got his own movie. Right, Terry? Terry, did you get your own movie? Marvel and DC have been battling each other for decades. But only in the past 10 or 15 years has that battle transcended into something beyond just the comic books. Because now it's in the movies. And the main consensus? Marvel is winning. But DC had The Dark Knight. And The Dark Knight Returns was pretty good. I mean, it made a lot of money. But what makes Marvel so appealing and DC so meh? Because with the exception of one DC film, all others since have just come across as meh. All DC films always seem like there's something big to be desired. Sometimes they focus on the action and forget to humanize the characters. That's ironic because Clark Kent isn't a human. He's actually Kal-El, an alien. That's funny. Other times they focus on character development too much. So when it comes time for, really big plot events, they skip over it. So you're left to wonder. So how did Bruce Wayne get back into Gotham when he was in, New Jersey or whatever third world country he was in? All his money was gone in an illegal stock exchange that happened during an armed heist. Really? I'm sure he could contend that. Seriously, how did he get back from New Jersey? And sometimes they screw up so royally, the movie is killed before the trailer is even released. A CGI suit? Really? Really, guys? Come on! Again, outside of The Lone Survivor, The Dark Knight was a really fantastic movie for a lot of really great reasons. DC has put out just passable films at best. Whereas Marvel has a string of successful movies that not only play into each other, creating interest for movies to be released years down the road sometimes, but totally stand on their own as a film. The Avengers is still the 4th highest growing movie of all time. Star Wars: The Force Awakens, Avatar, Titanic, The Avengers. Guardians of the Galaxy was amazing, and it made a star out of Chris Pratt. And those abs. I'm comfortable enough to be jealous. From Iron Man to Captain America to Thor, Marvel has created a slew of characters that hold their own franchises, profitable franchises, in a much larger universe. DC had, arguably, the 2 most recognizable superhero names in comic book history: Batman and Superman. And outside of the Dark Knight trilogy, it looks like DC just doesn't know what to do with them. With Man of Steel in 2014, DC tried to kickstart their own cinematic universe, much like Marvel had already done. But in basic DC fashion, they almost blew it immediately. Man of Steel was reviewed decently, but it received quite a bit of backlash. It did prove to be profitable, but they knew something had to change. Tell me again why Lois was invited into the ship? Oh yeah, so she could get exposition from his dead father's hologram. And then there's a 20-minute fight scene where nothing is at stake because both men are basically gods and they punch each other and it doesn't really hurt, it just throws them through buildings and they're just going at it and things are blowing up and I don't care because neither of these guys can get hurt, and then he snaps his neck and you could have done that the whole time? I mean, Lois could have just figured out who he was just like that? Now was that like a super reporter skill, or was that like just any competent reporter could have done that? Like, I don't know, like George Stephanopoulos gonna end up on Ma Kent's door in the next one, being like, hey, we did some basic reporting and figured out that your son was an alien. Anderson Cooper with like exclusives, like hologram Wyclef Jean in front of their house on New Year's or something. I would argue what DC has far more of than Marvel does in their universe is villains. DC has some incredibly recognizable villains. From the Joker, to Lex Luthor, to Mr. Freeze, to Darkseid, the Reverse Flash, Catwoman, and the Yellow Green Lantern. So just the Yellow Lantern then, right? I don't know, that movie sucked. But Marvel has done a fantastic job with the villains that they've had. Villains, not counting the X-Men ones because they belong to fucks, have not been their strong suit. With very few exceptions, their villains just aren't recognizable. Yellow Jacket, Obadiah Stane, Ronan the Accused, Malekith? These are some random villains that they're throwing in, some not even well known to comic book audiences. And they headlined really good Marvel movies. Even more, Marvel knows how to market new additions to their universe, even if they aren't super well known, like Black Panther.
We fight.
His appearance in the upcoming Civil War movie was let out of the bag early, but instead of revealing really good long looks at him in the trailer, they revealed tiny little smidgen that you have to pause and watch like 14 times. Fanboys and girls will geek out and be like, oh my god, his suit is black! Because it's the Black Panther. And now, DC has done what Marvel would never do. It took a character with name recognition and revealed them in the trailer, and they look like poo. Instead of creating, oh my god, is that? They created, oh my god, is that? In a movie that was already getting many concerns about overloading itself with too many characters, the trailer revealed a CGI villain. Probably Doomsday. Or at least that was the plan. Now it might be Bizarro. But the CBS show Supergirl has just released their own Bizarro story arc. And while those two universes are separate, unlike Marvel, it would be fairly irresponsible for DC to allow two properties to use the same well-known character in such different ways. That just gives me more proof as to why it was Doomsday. Or at least it was supposed to be. It has rocks coming out of its face, and arms, and things. It was supposed to be Doomsday, at least at some point in its development. If it is Bizarro, that would actually make more sense based on the idea of cloning Zod or cloning Superman and Lex trying to create his own version of Superman. But look at that thing. That's a version of Doomsday. It's a really crappy version of Doomsday. Doomsday never had laser eyeball powers. He was just so strong that he could kill Superman. For those of you unfamiliar, Doomsday was the guy that killed Superman. Killed him. Broke him in half. They had to bury this guy. They buried him in the earth. He was dead. And that was the series that basically got me reading comics as a kid. I mean, look at this. I still got these. Like the Doomsday fight when he had to fight the Justice League before he even got to Metropolis. He had to plow through all the C-list Justice Leaguers just to get to Metropolis and fight Superman. And then Superman died. And they had to give him a freaking funeral. Look at these. They're still sealed. Got me to read comic books and get into it and interested in the characters and what they were going through. You think anybody else bought a Guy Gardner comic book in the 90s for any other reason? Come on. Doomsday did that, friend. So without hammering the point in too much, Marvel gets it right. Civil War, it gets its own movie. Ultron, he got his own movie. To Kill a Mockingbird got its own movie. But instead, we're getting a loose adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns, which I think was a good idea. It was a way to establish Batman as someone who'd already been there and done that, getting brought back into the world of crime fighting. It would create conflict between him and Superman, who could be a threat. But now they expect me to believe that they're combining two epic storylines all together now? Somewhere along the way, DC took the Spider-Man 3 model of comic book filmmaking in that it wants to cram as many recognizable names in as possible so it can get as much money as possible from that one movie without consideration for what should be coming out in the future. So instead of a disposable villain that they could have used in Man of Steel, like Mixoplistic, or Livewire, that they could have brushed over a lot easier to add Clark's depth as a character, his relationships with his father and mother, perhaps how he survives as Clark, and so many more things they could have done. Instead, they have to throw in a recognizable character, Zod, which was a disservice to what he could have been. Man of Steel did well. It grossed $291 million. But it was a well-known franchise with okay reviews. Guardians of the Galaxy grossed $333 million domestically. And who the hell had ever heard of the Guardians of the Galaxy before that movie came out? Like, I'm a comic book nerd and I like barely knew who they were. I knew Rocket because he was a raccoon with a gun, and that's just kind of funny. That's a pretty funny. And then there was a tree, and I thought that's stupid. But it turned out awesome because it was done right. They made it as a good standalone movie with just enough in there to intrigue you for the rest of the universe. Could you imagine how much money Man of Steel could have made if it was actually really good? If it was done right? Man of Steel! He's freaking Superman! DC wants to sell us one epic movie at a time, often dropping the ball because of unobtainable goals and unrealistic expectations, a lot of which they set on themselves. Instead, Marvel has shown that slow and steady wins the race. Marvel is selling us dozens of movies over the next decade or more. So instead of getting that really big payday and having 5 flops, they're having really good paydays 10 times over. And in the process, making all the fanboys and girls really happy. Watchmen got its own movie. Ghostbusters got its own movie. The Audacity of Hope. Thanks, Obama. Well, they can do whatever they want to do. They're the people in charge. They're making the movies. I'm not making the movies, so, whatever.